Well, coming up, despite the weather, it was one heck of a fly-in.
It really was. We have historic airplanes off on an historic mission.
And we take you to our next fly-in for a little bit of a preview. AOPA Live this week begins in just a moment.
This is AOPA Live This Week with Tom Haynes and Melissa Rudinger.
Well, hello and welcome to AOPA Live This Week. I'm Warren Morningstar. Melissa is off doing her advocacy thing again, and we're here in our new AOPA museum.
We are, and that's coming off of a great weekend we had here at Frederick celebrating AOPA's 80th anniversary. We had incredible turnout, over 11,000 people out here at the airport, largest ever for one of our fly-ins. Our Friday night event was our flight line cookout. We had some 1,200 people come out for that, right on the flight line. Where
wow, and that was despite the weather.
It was despite the weather, yes. We had a lot of weather moving throughout the day at various times on Friday, and it came back and revisited us later on Saturday, but fortunately Saturday was a pretty good day.
Saturday was great, and a lot of interesting airplanes here too.
We had historic airplanes, we had new airplanes across the ramp, and we did two pilot town halls with AOPA President Mark Baker hosting an industry roundup on Friday, and then on Saturday we had our previous AOPA presidents joining us as well. Phil Boyer and Craig Fuller on stage with Mark.
And all three presidents were signing our book.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show.
Yes, we will.
Now, one of the really exciting things that happened at our fly-in was a visit from the D-Day Squadron and the Liberty Jump Team. These are C-47s and DC-3s. The Liberty Jump Team jumps in World War II paratrooper guard, including the old round parachutes. And it was something really exciting for everyone who attended the fly-in.
And so today we're up here to show the folks out here what some of our forefathers in the airborne did.
It's a great honor for Christopher Carroll, who's a part of the Liberty Jump Team in his spare time from being active duty. It makes the history mean that much more to him.
You know, this aircraft right here, Placid Lassie, actually dropped paratroopers during the D-Day invasion.
It's a stirring sight and a stirring roar from the radial engines on the C-47s. And the crowd when they see jumpers away.
And folks here on the ground in Frederick, those jumpers can hear you. Give them a round of applause. The Liberty Jump Team, let them know what a great job they're doing.
I think it's wonderful.
Hank Hilburn may have been on the other side of the planet.
In World War II, at the age of 18, I was on Okinawa.
But he has all the respect in the world for the airborne in Europe.
Fantastic job they did on D-Day. Oh my God, those guys. Hard to believe, you know, how they did that.
But thanks to the D-Day Squadron and the Liberty Jump Team, we get to see it firsthand.
Jumpers away! Jumpers away.
In Frederick, Paul Harrop, AOPA Live.
Now, those aircraft, those DC-3s and C-47s, were on their way to Connecticut, where they're staging before they fly across the Atlantic, where they're going to participate in the celebrations of the commemoration of the Normandy invasion. The Liberty Jump Team is going to be there too, and we'll be there as well.
We will. Plan to be there in Duxford, England for a fly-in just ahead of the actual anniversary. Then we'll be heading over to Normandy to see the airplanes come across the channel and drop parachutes behind enemy lines, so to speak, in France, just as they did 75 years ago.
75 years ago. Amazing.
Yeah, it really is amazing. It was great to see the airplanes here. People, wonderful after their flight. It was so cool to see them drop the fence after the DC-3s shut down, after they did the jumps, and see families go out on the ramp right up to these airplanes. Some of them get on board, and the pilots and the jump team were so welcoming of families to come on and see these historic airplanes that these folks will probably never get a chance to be up that close again. It's fun.
Yeah, a great event.
Right. Of course, the DC-3s weren't the only airplanes we had on display and active here at the show. We had a short takeoff and landing invitational on Saturday. It's supposed to be Friday too. That one unfortunately got weathered out, but on Saturday it was pretty exciting. We had our own Paul Harrop doing color commentary with Mike Vivian, a really experienced backcountry pilot, talking about the airplanes live on a Facebook stream.
And here comes our next Cub. He's down nice and low, getting it slowed down. He's got the flaps out. He's working the airplane kind of on the edge, what we call behind the power curve. We're in the region of reverse command. Slowing it down nicely. You notice the nose is pitched up. Boom, there he's down. As soon as he touches, the tail comes up a little bit, which kills the lift on the wing.
And we even had some of our own folks participating.
We did?
Yeah, as we told you last week, Mark Baker sort of tried to participate, and that mud kind of kept him in his amphibious airplane on the ground.
So you see, I won my bet.
Well, there you go.
I bet on Hirschman.
Yeah, Dave Hirschman was there, and we had Richard McSpadden in the Super Cub. And so it was a good collection of AOPA folks out there at the Invitational as well.
And of course, we'll have the STOL demonstration at Livermore as well.
Yeah, we have Livermore, California coming up.
Coming up.
Yeah, we do. And so if you want to see the STOL Invitational as it happened here in Frederick, we've got it on our Facebook page. So check it out. And of course, part of that, as I said, our celebration of our 80th anniversary was this week. Actually, May 15th, on Wednesday of this week, was the actual anniversary, incorporated 80 years ago. And so we had a lot of people coming out to the show and expressing their gratitude for AOPA and all the work and advocacy that AOPA has done over the years to help protect our freedom to fly.
I mean, it's celebrating a lot of people that did a lot of hard work and, took a lot of their time to really contribute towards aviation.
I mean, the freedom to fly, it's just awesome.
It's a great way to celebrate 80 years, and I like these fly-ins.
I mean, AOPA has been around for a long time, obviously, really going to bat for a lot of general aviation pilots.
Oh, the freedom to fly in the U.S. would not be what it is today without AOPA. It just wouldn't be.
Now, Ed has been to most of our fly-ins, and we hope that he can make it out to California for our Livermore fly-in. That's coming up on June 20th and 21st. So on top of everything that you've come to know and love about our fly-ins, there are also some very interesting things to do out there in California.
One of the nice things about this airport is our proximity to the Bay Area, as well as our beautiful California weather allows for a lot of VFR days that you just don't get if you're inside the Bay. We have a lot to do in our city. We have a very vibrant downtown that has quite a few options for fine dining, as well as drinks and entertainment, as well as, of course, our world-class wineries that dot the Tri-Valley. For those who would be interested in doing hiking or water sports, there's quite a few lakes and trails within a few miles of the airport.
And we'll have more stories about Livermore through the next few weeks before the fly-in actually starts. Changing gears now and going back to Washington, 2 hearings on Capitol Hill this week. Both of them ended up being pretty much about the Boeing 737 MAX. In the aviation subcommittee hearing over on the House side, the FAA was trying to defend its certification process, and several people at that hearing blamed the 2 737 MAX accidents somewhat on the pilots.
The preliminary accident report prepared by the Ethiopian authorities concludes that the pilots followed proper procedures, but there are several facts that absolutely contradict that conclusion. First, the aircraft accelerated throughout the entire flight. The pilots never pulled the throttles back after setting them for full thrust at takeoff.
When a pilot feels the nose going over in his hands, he'll feel it in the yoke. He's trained from the beginning, at least U.S. pilots, and it's not to say that international or not. That's runaway pitch trim. And when the MCAS kicked in when it wasn't supposed to, it drove the nose over. In the pilot's hands, they could feel it. So when we looked at that data and realized by the flight data recorder showed that the runaway pitch trim procedure was not done with Lion Air in the entirety of the flight, we knew that this needs to be emphasized. And that's what the emergency AD did. It said, remember, if you get a pitch over activity in an airplane and you didn't tell the airplane to do it, that's runaway pitch trim. Run the runaway pitch trim procedure.
Now, on the Senate side, the guy who's likely to take over for acting administrator Elwell, was also grilled on about the 737 MAX.
I would put my family, I would not certify an airplane or put my family on any airplane unless I thought it was safe, and I think that we are indeed the gold, if not the platinum standard in the world.
Now, Stephen Dixon is a former Air Force and airline pilot. He was a Delta Airlines executive. Members on both sides of the aisle of the committee seem to like him, so it's a pretty good bet that he is going to be confirmed eventually as the new FAA administrator.
And the good thing is he's been on record as saying that he opposes air traffic control privatization. So if that ever comes back up again, hopefully he'll still be an advocate for us.
Well, we can hope, because Delta was the one airline that was the odd man out on that issue.
For a while.
For a while.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Other news out of D.C. is ADS-B, the rebate program. We've talked about that a lot over recent years. And it went away for a while, then it came back, and we still had a lot of money left over, but it finally got all dried up just on Saturday, as a matter of fact. FAA announced that the last of the ADS-B rebates had been sucked up, which is good news, meaning people are equipping their airplane ahead of that January 1, 2020 deadline. However, it may not be too late. As people don't take advantage of the ones that they've put in reservations for, if they become back available, the FAA says they're going to put them back into the system. So check the website, the FAA website, at about 1 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays, and either they're there, click fast, because you might have an opportunity to go ahead and get one of those rebates, as a few might be left.
That's sort of like being real quick on the clicker to get that A seat on Southwest.
Something like that, or your favorite eBay auction.
Well, who says folks in aviation don't have a sense of humor? This came across my Facebook feed the other day, this sign at the Juneau Airport, and it's warning people, particularly people who are walking around the airport, to be aware of coyotes. But look down at the bottom sign and read very carefully. You'll see that it warns you to watch out for a coyote carrying an Acme box or a big magnet. And folks, the sign is real. The Juneau newspaper even did a story on it saying, yes, the sign is real. Folks at the airport said they thought maybe they'd get a little more attention to it if they did it with a little bit of humor.
Yeah, well, good on them. If you see a roadrunner with an anvil, stay out of the way.
So when we come back, a tour of our little museum here.
And a whole lot more on AOPA Live this week.
The people of AOPA's Legal Services Plan work to help protect your certificates, and they love to fly as much as you do. The AOPA Legal Services Plan is offered as part of our Pilot Protection Services. It's a members-only benefit provided to thousands of pilots like you.
Welcome back to AOPA Live this week. We're here, as we said earlier, in the museum space that we created inside the AOPA headquarters building, partly to respect our 80th anniversary, but also as a way just to going forward, allow people to look at some of the things that AOPA has been responsible for over the years as we move it into our 9th decade of being advocate for general aviation and our freedom to fly. And it was a team effort. A bunch of us in the building worked hard on it. I know Chris Rose, one of our photographers, was particularly helpful in pulling together a bunch of the artifacts that you can see here. Some very interesting things. Our facilities staff was great too in kind of redoing the space to make it have a little bit of a hangar feel to it, and as well as all the things that on display that Chris was responsible for.
Yeah, they really did a nice job. And you know, 80 years is, I think, a really significant anniversary. In fact, so significant that it was even recognized by Congress.
Senate Resolution 203, recognizing the 80th anniversary of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
Senators Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma and Tammy Duckworth of Illinois were the co-sponsors of that resolution. Both of them are pilots. And Inhofe said that AOPA has a strong legacy of being tireless advocates for pilots and contributing to aviation safety. Furthermore, they have played a vital role in educating members of Congress on issues important to the general aviation community. And of course, Senator Inhofe is also the sponsor of the Pilot's Bill of Rights. Inhofe has been a great friend to general aviation through the years.
Yeah, he really has, and really good on a lot of those issues. And really that's what AOPA was founded for. It was a recognition by pilots back in the late 1930s as war was brewing in Europe that aviation wasn't well organized in the United States, and that we needed a strong advocate. And so a group of pilots got together in Philadelphia and kind of scoped out what that might look like and what became ultimately the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
They were a friend of by the name of Noble, who said, and he was associated with the government and the airlines. And he said, the airlines are well organized. Organized. What's wrong with you guys? Get to work, in effect. And Abby listened carefully, got the four of us together, and that's how May 15th, 1939.
So of course Paul knew all of the founding members and was very involved early on in the organization, a member of the board for some 40 years and also a chairman emeritus. Now the Noble that he speaks about is Edward J. Noble, who became chairman of the Civil Aeronautics Board, which was the predecessor to what we know as the FAA today. And Abby, well, that was Abby Wolf. He was one of the founding members, and there were a lot of pilot organizations at the time representing pilots mostly for fun and recreation, which is great, but there wasn't any voice out there that was really working hard to protect general aviation and to give it a voice in Washington, D.C. The airlines were well organized. They had a lot of influence in D.C., as did the military. Nobody was looking out for what they called at the time miscellaneous aviation. And so it was these five founders in Philadelphia that felt like they needed to organize general aviation in a way that gave it a voice, and that's how AOPA came about.
Our five founders were Philadelphia businessmen and attorneys, and they got together in the Philadelphia Aviation Country Club on Wings Field and helped organize AOPA. Their mission statement, and it's still our mission statement, is to make flying less expensive, safer, more useful, and more fun. In those early organizing days, they sort of had, it's strange, but one of their biggest problems was coming up with a name. One of the members wanted to call it Pilots Inc. There were some other names floated out. It got to be about 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning, and one of the founders just said, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. Let's call it what it is, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
And it wasn't just the need for professional representation that drove the formation of the organization. The founders could see the war coming, and they knew that that might threaten flying, private flying, like all of our members did at the time. And so they worked to set up a program called the AOPA Air Guard, which later became the Civil Air Patrol. And then they pushed Congress to establish the Civil Pilot Training Program. And then after after Pearl Harbor, rather, all of civil aviation was grounded, but AOPA once again went to work and created the Emergency Pilot Registry, which allowed people who were on that registry to go out and actually continue flying, and they were actually even doing hunting for subs off the coast and doing other useful things for the war effort.
And that was all due to a young guy by the name of Doc Hartranft. Now Doc had come to the attention of the founders because he had formed a flying club at the University of Philadelphia, and he also formed the National Collegiate Aviation Club, which still exists today with a slightly different name. And so they hired Doc to come and run the organization.
Doc Hartranft was a fascinating person. He was a widower with a daughter. Many people never knew he was married. And kind of a patrician guy. Not particularly outgoing and not confrontational. But he too was an organizer. The four were attracted to him, five, as the first president, because he'd just come out of Penn, Philadelphia boy, and he'd formed a flying club. And he was good at building the organization, and he was very good at figuring out how to do it socially and otherwise. But I go back to the point, it's not confidential. So he hired this fella, Max Carrant. He was a lovely character. He was one of my favorite people. Speaking of pugnacious, his nose had even been broken in a boxing match. He just matched it physically and in his chat. And he developed something, Warren, called the Confidential Newsletter.
Now, of course, one of those early employees was Max Carrant that Paul talks about. He was the editor at the time of Popular Flying magazine, which later became Flying Magazine. It was owned by Ziff Davis, and AOPA had a deal with Ziff Davis where the AOPA news section was included inside of Popular Aviation or Popular Flying and then later Flying magazine. So if you were a subscriber to one of those magazines and an AOPA member, you got that special insert, which was, from a publishing standpoint, seems like it was pretty revolutionary at the time.
It was indeed. Now, Max eventually became an AOPA employee.
He did.
And one of the things that Max created was the infamous yellow sheet. Just right down there.
Yes, it is.
It is. And to say that it was controversial?
Yes, it was. Max loved digging up stuff on people and putting it out there.
Well, he was a former investigative journalist, so that was his forte.
Right, it was. In fact, the publication was such a significant part of AOPA that AOPA actually moved its headquarters to Chicago, which is where Ziff Davis was located at the time. And so for a while, the organization was run out of Chicago, where Max was.
It was in the transit building. Although Doc's office, what he shared with film cans and potatoes because of one of our founders' businesses also happened to be there. So,
little known facts.
Well, you know, Tom, Max was a character, but we've had a lot of interesting people and characters through the years as AOPA members. Of course, a lot of famous movie stars, you know, Harrison Ford.
Right, yeah, Harrison Ford. Michael Dorn, if you're a Star Trek fan, you know Michael Dorn as Worf.
Lieutenant Worf.
Right.
Kurt Russell.
Yep.
In fact, Kurt is a very enthusiastic member. He's shown up at some of our conventions through the years.
Yep. Craig Ferguson, the talk show host for a long time. He's an AOPA member.
Right. So, some of the astronauts. John Glenn was one.
Yeah, he was. And so was Jim Lovell. And of course, we have the interesting letter we have here from Gordon Cooper.
That's right. On Mercury letterhead from Gordon Cooper, and he says that he's interested in joining the association, and he mentions that he's just purchased a Beechcraft F-35 Bonanza.
Oh, what good choice he has.
He does indeed. Now, Tom, you know, another famous member was the radio and television host, Arthur Godfrey. A lot of folks now probably don't remember Arthur, but back in the time, he was really very famous. Arthur flew a DC-3, he flew it out of Leesburg and landed here at Frederick several times, we know for sure. And he helped participate in one of the very first AOPA Sweepstakes giveaway. You know, here are some of the aircraft models of some of the aircraft that we've given away. And it certainly has been a lot of fun through the years giving away these airplanes, hasn't it?
It has, and we've given away some 25 airplanes over the years, mostly refurbished ones, but some new ones from time to time.
So what was your favorite reaction?
Favorite reaction was, it may have been the fellow who won the 172 that we gave away just a couple years ago, actually, in Las Vegas, and we surprised him, as we always try to do. He was super excited.
Yeah. So we have compiled some of those sweepstakes giveaways, just to give you an idea of how some of our members in the past have reacted to being surprised by getting an airplane.
He's won an airplane.
No, I don't believe that. What?
I'm ecstatic. I didn't believe it at first.
He's shitting me, right?
You, sir, are the lucky member. You have won the sweepstakes, and over here, this is your family's new airplane.
You are the winner. Congratulations.
Do you guys make a mistake? I'm here to look at another plane.
How about our Millennium Mooney? Alex, you are the winner.
Were you expecting us? I'm Phil Boyer.
I'm Craig Fuller.
Mark Baker, the president of AOPA, here to present you with your brand new Debonair.
Oh, I'd love to see. Yeah, that's a good one.
Take it back. It's yours.
That's pretty good. Are you not sitting? He's shitting me, right?
It's also true.
Are you kidding me?
Wow.
And having been with this plane a number of locations like Oshkosh and Expo this year, I can't tell you how many members have said, that's my plane. I now can honestly say, that's your plane.
No. Yes. No way. Come on. No way. No, you gotta be kidding me. No. You're kidding.
right, so Tom, do you remember what the first sweepstakes airplane was?
The first sweepstakes airplane is...
Before you were born.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a Piper Tri-Pacer.
It was indeed. Okay, 1998, what was our sweepstakes airplane?
Oh, that was a Piper Tri-Pacer.
Right, the timeless Tri-Pacer.
Yes.
And I landed that airplane at Washington National. I guess it was Reagan National at that point. I don't remember, but anyhow. I'm taxiing down the runway in this the taxiway in this Tri-Pacer, and I go past an Air Canada airliner, and I hear on the radio, "Is that the new Air Force One?" But you know, sadly, we can't land at Reagan National anymore, and that was one of the outcomes of 9/11, which of course is one of our big challenges as an organization.
Yeah, it definitely was. Boy, in that morning, as we all remember where we were at the time, and of course those of us who were here watching it kind of unfold on television, we knew right away that it was going to be a challenge for aviation, that there were going to be a lot of security concerns, and so AOPA went to work right away, and Phil Boyer was our president at the time, and he absolutely began working immediately to make sure that the general aviation was going to be back flying as soon as possible.
And as far as the government was concerned, let's just shut down every single small airport because these people are flying around. We have no idea who they are or what they are. And so I think 9/11 was a giant challenge, but there were many others. There were, you know, the celebrity crashes, John Denver, the Kennedy crash, where there was a lot of people wanting to limit flying, like you shouldn't fly at night without an instrument rating, and things like that that were really major challenges.
Some folks may not remember, but all aviation was grounded. But actually, general aviation were the first aircraft back in the air because of the work that the AOPA was doing, and particularly Melissa Rudinger, who went and camped at FAA, literally camped at FAA. The first aircraft we got back into the air were emergency aircraft, people doing things like blood shuttles and organ shuttles and that sort of thing. But it was a long fight to get us back into the airspace around the major airports.
It was. There was the first, they just did, if you weren't on an IFR flight plan, forget it. They weren't going to let anybody fly, and that seemed like it was going to be like a permanent thing. And AOPA worked hard to get VFR flying back, and then also to gradually reduce the restrictions that are around the Class B airspace, which also had been pretty much shut down to anybody but IFR flights.
There's Tom, you know, we've moved over from another cabinet here into this area where we have a lot of our insignia material, some interesting things through the years, including our wings and how they have changed a little bit through time.
Yeah, they have. Apparently, there was a lot of discussion early on in the organization, right after they named it, about what are these wings going to look like? And after a lot of back and forth, they ended up with what looks like a lot like what you have on your shirt there. But we have some pencil sketches around back and forth, so there must have been a lot of debate. And they ended up looking somewhat like the Royal Air Force wings, but they were careful because remember the war was going on, so they didn't want any confusion. So they purposely designed them so they didn't look quite like the U.S. Army Air Corps wings. And so that's how we ended up with the wings.
Some other interesting membership stuff here. I really like this. The membership card, which is on an IBM punch card and says, "Do not fold, spindle, or mutilate."
Good advice when you're dealing with punch cards.
Yeah, membership dues $10 back then.
Yes. So as I said earlier, the organization at one point early on was based out of Chicago. Then it moved to D.C., again, being an advocate for general aviation. They wanted to be close to D.C., so we had offices in D.C., where we still maintain probably the largest group of folks of any of the aviation organizations in our D.C. office, right up on Capitol Hill. But the organization itself moved to Bethesda, and for many years was in an office in Bethesda that's now a pizza parlor. Who knew?
Pizza parlor, and then we moved to the Air Rights building.
That's also in Bethesda.
Right, and that was kind of an interesting story because AOPA had actually signed the lease so that they could have the word AOPA right above Air Rights building, but Air Rights actually had nothing to do with AOPA. It was the developer of the building had bought the air rights over a railroad stub so that he could build the building above the railroad track, and that's why it was called the Air Rights building. But then the AOPA thought that it would really be good to have the headquarters on an airport so members could fly in. Looked initially at Montgomery County Air Park, but we were worried that that was going to become encroached, which it has.
It has, yes.
So, and now here we are in Frederick.
That's right. Yeah, there was an effort, went out to a bunch of communities in the region and asked them, ones at airports, you know, what kind of a proposal can you get to have the world's largest aviation organization come to your airport? And several considered, and ultimately we ended up here in Frederick in 1983, finished this building.
Right, and now we have 2 buildings on the campus with the main AOPA headquarters, 421 Aviation Way,
right,
and 411 Aviation Way, the home of the You Can Fly initiative.
And the AOPA Live Studios.
Indeed. All right. So, Tom, really a lot of interesting aviation history in our little AOPA museum, but really we just sort of scratched the surface. So much more about it.
There really is, and so we created a book this year, partly again to commemorate the organization's 80th anniversary, but also just to document all the interesting general aviation history that has occurred over the last 8 decades, because AOPA and general aviation sort of grew up together. So we created this book. It's sort of the history of general aviation through the lens of AOPA, if you will, and it's available through the AOPA store, which you can get to on the website. And we've been actually having a good sales of it, and it's been very popular.
Yeah, it really, I mean, the photography in it is just absolutely beautiful. It's a great coffee table book.
It really is. Tom Horn on our staff wrote most of it. I wrote the last chapter, and we had contributions from a lot of other members of the staff, and of course our usual great photographers all contributed to it as well.
Well, and that's it for the show this week from the AOPA Museum. And by the way, this is open. Anytime you want to come into AOPA headquarters during normal business hours, you're welcome to come see the museum. You can fly in, park on our ramp, walk right in.
Right. They give tours all the time to members. It seems like Fridays are a particularly popular day. We even have a cafeteria upstairs, so you can come in and have lunch with us and hang out for a while in the museum.
So, again, thanks so much for tuning in. We really appreciate your watching, and we appreciate your comments. You can reach us at aopalive@aopa.org. And if you're watching us on YouTube,
hit that subscribe button.
Like or subscribe.
That's right. See you next week from the studio.
Purchasing your own aircraft is an exciting experience. AOPA Finance simplifies the process, saving you money with lower interest rates and hassle-free loans, so you get into your new aircraft sooner.